A young Mustang lies dying in a pool of its own blood, and an old wolf is standing over it, facing down a pack of predators. Behind the wolf, no cubs, no pack, just a bleeding soul waiting for the end. A prey, weak, alone, not worth protecting. Yet the wolf stays, gaunt, gasping, legs trembling, but refusing to take a single step back. Nearby, a woman bursts out. What the hell is going on? Not because of the horse, not because of the wolf, but because she just witnessed something that shattered every instinct she once believed was absolute. No one understands. No one believes it. No one can explain it. All we know is this. Life, death, instinct, loyalty, they all collided. In a place humans were never meant to witness. And now, we invite you into a story. Not meant for logic, but for the part of you that still remembers what it means to feel. If you saw a soul collapsing in front of you, would you walk away, or stand your ground in a pack of wolves? It didn't begin with a struggle. It began with a storm, a silence, and a canyon waiting to ignite. The wind had changed. That was the first sign. For days, Ardell Canyon had simmered under a sun so cruel it seemed to split the rocks. The earth cracked. The air shimmered. The mesquite trees shrank into themselves like dying lungs, and even the shadows had abandoned their posts. Nothing moved. Not the lizards, not the hawks, not even the wind, until now. Now, the wind screamed. It came howling from the north, dragging with it a heat that wasn't natural. A heat that smelled wrong. Acrid. Alive. And then came the smoke. It started as a whisper against the horizon. A dark tongue licking the sky, curling and coiling into itself like some ancient, waking beast. By the time the Mustangs saw it, it was already too late. They scattered. There were 27 of them, wild, black-bodied shapes against the golden canyon. Ash-colored hooves thundered across the brittle ground. Dust rose with each frantic step. Mars screamed. Foals cried. And in the chaos, one sound was swallowed whole. Lorian. He was only 3 weeks old. Tiny. Delicate. Legs still too long for his body. He had never run far from his mother. Never felt the sun burn his nostrils. Never known fire. Until now. The heat swept through like a predator. The flames weren't in sight yet, but the panic was. It spread faster than smoke. The herd bolted as one living creature, muscle and memory and terror fused into instinct. Lorian tried to follow. He couldn't keep up. He stumbled once. Then again. His mother whinnied through the smoke, her voice high and sharp. He tried to find her, eyes wide, ears twitching. But all he saw was dust. Hooves. Fire-colored light. Then, nothing. He fell. The rocks beneath him were hot. They scraped his knees, tore at his flanks. His chest heaved. Each breath tasted like ash. He looked up, blinking through smoke, expecting to see hooves coming back for him. There were none. No mother. No herd. Only flame. The edge of the fire appeared like a curtain falling. Trees crackled and split. The air rippled like boiling oil. Birds shot out of the sky in terrified bursts, their wings singed. Coyotes ran silent. The fire wanted everything. Lorien tried to rise again, a wild, flailing motion, more instinct than will. His legs folded. He slid down a slope of stone, landing hard. His knees buckled inward. Pain bloomed white in his chest. He thought he saw movement, a familiar flash of mane in the haze. Mother? The thought wasn't formed in words. It was the ache of recognition, the surge of hope. But the figure was not running toward him. It was running the other way. It disappeared into the smoke like a ghost. Lorien didn't cry out. He couldn't. His throat had closed, clogged with smoke and betrayal. Just ahead, a dead stallion lay sprawled on its side, body still smoking from a recent burn. Lorien's eyes met its open ones, glassy, lifeless, still staring toward the sun. He scrambled back, trembling. His breath came faster now, as though trying to outrun what his body already knew. He was alone. Too small to flee. Too late to be saved. He collapsed into a shallow ditch near a dry riverbed, his legs folded awkwardly, breath coming in short, frantic gasps. His chest rose and fell, then slowed. He wasn't thinking anymore. Not of running. Not of finding his mother. Not even of pain. Only of stillness. His eyes stayed open, and in them, not fear. Not hope. Just the quiet, glassy look of a creature that knows the world is no longer coming for it. The world has already passed, and left it behind. Night was falling when he caught the scent. It clung to the dry air like something wounded. A trace of blood. Burned hair. The faint, sick sweet note of something very young, very alive, and very close to death. The old wolf froze. Dusk. That was the name humans might have given him, if anyone still tracked wolves in this part of the world. He had once led a pack, 12 strong, proud, black-coated hunters with eyes like sharpened stones. But that was a lifetime ago. Now, his body carried the history of battles lost. A crooked paw. Torn ear. A long scar that cut across his ribs like a river of white. He moved alone. And he was starving. Dusk had been trailing the fire line from the far side of Ardell Ridge. He had not run from the flames. He was too old for panic, and far too used to smoke. Fire meant disruption. Disruption meant prey. Sometimes dead. Sometimes weak. He followed the scent downhill. Step by step, silent, slow. His body ached with every motion. But the scent grew stronger, fresher. His nose quivered. Something was here. Something small. A flicker of movement. Dusk crept forward and stopped. There, curled up in the dirt, at the edge of a dried-out riverbed, lay a foal. A Mustang. Barely more than a newborn. Its chestnut coat was dulled with ash, its flanks scraped, its legs folded awkwardly beneath it. It didn't lift its head. It didn't whimper. It simply stared ahead with eyes that weren't even blinking anymore. Dusk stepped closer. The foal didn't flinch. Closer still. Nothing. He stood just a few feet away now, his paws stirring the dust. He could smell the blood. Not much, but enough. His breath rasped. His mouth opened slightly. Hunger stirred. This should have been easy. But then, the foal moved. Just its head. Slowly. Like it had forgotten how. The eyes met his. And in that moment, something changed. It didn't kick, didn't scream, didn't try to crawl away. It looked at him, not with fear, not even with pleading, but with something else entirely. Acceptance. As if the foal already knew what he was. As if it had already decided it didn't matter. Dusk hesitated. The air was thick with heat and ash. The wind had calmed, but everything smelled of endings. A few yards off, a tree still burned from within, pulsing dimly like a heart. He had eaten creatures like this before. Younger, healthier. He had ended their lives quickly, cleanly. That was the wild's way. But now, as he looked at the foal, he didn't move. Something about this moment was wrong. Or maybe, just maybe, it was right in a way he hadn't known in years. He stepped back. The foal blinked. Once. The two of them stayed there like that. Two creatures, born to be enemies, stranded in a canyon neither one had chosen. Then, from above the ridge, a gust of wind blew through again, carrying with it fresh smoke and the distant, rising yips of coyotes. Dusk turned his head. They were coming. He looked down at the foal. It still hadn't moved. Its breath was barely a whisper now. He didn't understand it. But something deep inside him, older than scars, older than pain, told him one thing. Not yet. He wouldn't leave. Not this time. Dusk did not leave. He did not bite. Did not kill. Did not turn away from the weak, dying thing before him. Instead, he lay down. With a soft grunt, he lowered his aching body beside the foal. Bones cracked beneath his weight. His chest heaved once, then settled. The night air cooled slowly around them, but the heat of the fire still radiated in waves from the distant ridge. The foal barely stirred. Its breathing came in shallow hiccups now. Dry. Grating. Each inhale a battle. Dusk turned his head and looked at it, not like a predator sizing up prey, but like something older. Something gentler. He could hear the faint click of its parched lips. The way its tongue shifted slightly in its mouth, as if it had forgotten what moisture felt like. He sniffed once. Then again. The scent was unmistakable. The foal was dying of thirst. And there was no water. Dusk rose. Every bone protested. But he stood. He looked at the foal one last time, then turned and began to walk. The canyon was darker now. The flames had moved on, leaving behind scorched earth and flickering ash. Smoke drifted like spirits between the rocks. Each step Dusk took was slow, deliberate, his nose lowered to the ground. He searched. Not for meat. Not for blood. For water. It felt strange. The old pull of hunger still tugged at him, but something deeper had settled in his chest. Something he couldn't name. Not compassion. Not pity. Just a pull. After nearly 20 minutes, he found it. A hollow, tucked into the side of a ravine. Sheltered from the worst of the heat. In it, a shallow puddle, muddy, but cool. It shimmered faintly under the moonlight. A survivor's gift. Dusk lowered his head and drank. Not deeply. Just enough to wet his mouth. Then he turned back. The climb was harder. His legs trembled. He stumbled once, scraped his shoulder on a jutting rock. But he kept going. When he returned, the foal hadn't moved. Dusk stepped beside it, lowered his muzzle, and began to lick. One long stroke across the foal's cracked lips. Then another. Cool water, pulled from his own mouth, transferred gently onto the dying creature. The foal stirred. Just a twitch. But it was real. Its tongue slid out slightly, catching the moisture. Its lips trembled. A sound, a dry, broken gasp, escaped its throat. Dusk repeated the motion. Again. 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 He did not understand why. Only that he must. For a moment, he paused. The foal's breath hitched again, sharp, sudden, like the hiccup of a fading heartbeat. Dusk lifted his head slowly, looked up at the sky. And in that moonlight, the old wolf did something he hadn't done in years. He howled. Not loud. Not fierce. Not to mark a kill or stake a claim. It was soft, hoarse, and heartbreakingly short. It was not a sound for enemies. It was a sound for the lonely, for the forgotten, for something inside him that had not died, but had simply gone quiet. The night deepened. Coyotes called again in the distance, but none dared come closer. Not yet. Eventually, the foal's breathing changed. It steadied. Only slightly, but enough. And for the first time since he had arrived, Dusk did not feel like a ghost. He curled his body around the foal, sheltering it from the cold wind. His ribs ached. His eyes burned. But his soul, for the first time in a long time, did not feel hollow. He closed his eyes and chose to stay. Mira Wells had seen wild things before. She had photographed stallions rearing against each other in clouds of dust. Their manes flared like war banners. She had crawled on her belly through sagebrush to capture a mother Mustang nuzzling her newborn beneath the pink dawn of Utah. She had once stared into the unblinking eyes of a puma, camera shaking in her hands, and still held the shutter down. But she had never seen anything like this. She stood motionless on the ridge, breath trapped somewhere between her lungs and throat, her boots rooted in scorched sand. Below her, in a bowl of stone wrapped in ashen ghost light, the impossible unfolded in silence. A wolf. An old one. Scarred. Thin. His ribs moved with each breath like paper bellows. He was curled around a foal. Not eating it. Not guarding it as a kill. Protecting it. Mira didn't raise her camera. The Nikon hung from her neck like an artifact. Her fingers didn't twitch. Her heart did. What she saw felt private, something wild, yes, but not meant to be captured. Not meant to be turned into pixels and light. It belonged not to the lens, but to the soul. The foal moved slightly, lips twitching. Mira saw the wolf lower its muzzle, licking its mouth, and then, gently, licking the foal's again. Again. And again. It wasn't care. It wasn't instinct. It was choice. Something in Mira trembled. She didn't breathe. Couldn't. What name could she give this? It was not mercy. Not survival. Not science. It was something older than language. Something from the days when fire was still a mystery and the boundary between species had not yet calcified into fear. She took a slow step back. Then another. She found a boulder. Saturday. Her hands fell to her knees, open, shaking slightly. She had come looking for a lost herd. The fire had scattered them. Her informant said one foal was seen heading into the lower canyon. Alone. She had expected to find bones. What she found was a miracle. She sat with it, watched it, for hours. And as she sat, memories surfaced. She remembered a colt she had photographed 5 years ago. One eye blind from birth, tail missing from a coyote attack. No one thought he'd survive the winter. But she followed him through the snow until spring, and in the last photo she ever took of him, he was galloping alongside a new herd, head high, scars glinting in the light. She remembered her father's voice on the tape he left her, the one she kept on an old cassette in her camera bag. "You don't always shoot to remember, Mira," he had said. "Sometimes you don't shoot because remembering would cost you something you're not ready to give." Tears touched her eyes now, not from grief, but from knowing he would have understood this moment. The wolf didn't sleep deeply. Every sound made his ears twitch. Once, he looked directly at her, just once, and held her gaze. Not with threat. Not with fear. Just recognition. He knew she saw him. He knew she was choosing not to interrupt. And in that long, breathless stretch of dawn, Mira noticed something else. The foal was breathing easier. Not healed. Not saved. But present. Alive. And the wolf, he didn't move to leave. He shifted slightly, wrapping his frail frame more tightly around the young Mustang. His tail flicked once, and Mira felt, absurdly, like she was intruding on something sacred. She whispered, "Some images aren't for cameras. They're for the parts of us we forgot we still had." She didn't know why she said it aloud. But the wolf blinked, slow. And Mira felt, beyond all reason, that he understood. She rose silently, brushing dust from her jeans. The Nikon still hung from her neck, untouched. She didn't lift it. She wouldn't. Some miracles aren't meant to be witnessed through glass. They're meant to be carried. And Mira walked back toward her truck, toward the world, already knowing. She would never tell anyone the full truth of what she saw. Only that something in her changed. And that somewhere in the ash, a soul chose not to hunt, but to heal. The wind died first. It was the kind of stillness that made your skin itch, as if the world itself had paused, holding its breath. Not a bird. Not a breeze. Even the ash falling from the blackened canyon walls floated slower, like time had thickened. Lorian stirred. His legs twitched, then folded in again. His lips cracked as he tried to lift his head. A breath. Then another. He managed to shift, just barely, dragging one foreleg beneath his trembling body. And then, he tried to stand. It was not strength. It was not instinct. It was something else. Hope! The foal's legs buckled immediately. His knees slammed the stone. A gasp left his throat, broken and raw. Blood wept anew from the wound on his leg, dark and slow, soaking into the dust. Still, he tried again. And this time, as he lifted his head, his eyes did not look toward escape. They searched for dusk. The wolf lay a few feet away, his sides rising with tired breath. He had not slept, not fully. But when Lorian's gaze met his, something in him shifted. Then, the sound came. A yip. Hi. Then another. Then a chorus. Coyotes. Not distant anymore. Closer. Dusk rose slowly. His joints clicked like old wood. He turned his head and saw them, 4, maybe 5 shapes moving across the rocks, lean and fast. Their eyes glinted like flint under the early sun. They fanned out. Dusk stood taller. Lorien's breath caught. He tried to rise again, flailing. One leg under, then another. He got halfway up before his body betrayed him and dropped again with a pained grunt. The coyotes crept forward. One on the left snarled. Another licked its muzzle. They moved like shadows, fluid, hungry. And Lorien looked up at Dusk. Not with fear, but with something ancient. Something that didn't belong to prey. Faith. Dusk stepped forward. The coyotes hesitated. The scarred wolf bared his teeth. His breath came shallow and sharp. He stood tall, but his legs shook, and blood darkened the fur on his belly from where the rocks had split open an old wound. He didn't care. One of the coyotes darted too close. Dusk lunged. Fangs snapped. Fur flew. A yelp. Then blood. One of the coyotes tumbled back, limping. But another seized the moment, leaping from behind. Teeth sank into Dusk's flank. He howled. Not in pain. In defiance. The sound echoed across the canyon like a bell rung at the end of the world. A voice not of rage, but of refusal. Of one creature choosing not to be what nature demanded. Lorien flinched, but did not flee. Dusk staggered, crimson dripping from his side. He snarled and turned, snapping the air with enough force to scatter the coyotes. But they circled again. This time, Dusk stumbled. And still, he stepped forward. He didn't know why he fought this hard. Perhaps he wasn't fighting for the foal, but with him. Because something in those eyes reminded him of himself. The part of him that once led a pack. The part that hadn't yet faded into hunger and loneliness. Maybe the foal's broken stare was a mirror of his own, the reflection of a soul not yet ready to be forgotten. A stone clattered behind. The coyotes turned. Mira. She was running, full tilt, breath ragged, boots slamming the earth. She screamed, "H-U-I." No response. She picked up a rock and hurled it. It missed. Another. Missed again. She reached the clearing and, without thought, smashed her water canteen against a stone. Crack. The sound rang out, unnatural and furious. Echoes danced up the canyon walls. The coyotes froze. Mira threw her camera. Not to the ground. At the nearest coyote. It struck its shoulder with a sharp thud, causing it to yelp and retreat. "Stay away from them," she screamed, her voice not belonging to a photographer anymore, but to something primal. Something protective. Something human. Dusk turned to her. His eyes were bloodshot. Tired. But he stood. Mira stepped forward. Closer. Between the coyotes and the foal. She picked up a fallen branch. Raised it. Yelled again. The coyotes hissed, unsure. 3 species. 3 lives. 1 battlefield. From above, the canyon looked like a painting etched into fire. A foal collapsed on the stone, legs curled beneath it, eyes wide with waiting, a wolf bleeding and breathing through pain, and a woman, panting, shaking, holding a piece of wood like a sword. None of them should have been there. None of them should have stayed. And yet, not one of them left. The coyotes backed up, then paused, then, one by one, turned. They didn't flee. They withdrew, watching, confused, as if they had seen something not meant for them, something unnatural, sacred. What they saw was not strength. It was a choice. A wolf who bled not for territory, but for something fragile. A foal who had not run. A woman who had not turned away. They saw it and could not understand it. And so they left. When they were gone, Mira dropped the branch, fell to her knees. She crawled to Lorien, who looked up at her with glassy eyes. She touched his muzzle. "Shoo," she whispered. "You're okay." Then she turned to Dusk. He was trembling. She reached toward him, but stopped. He looked at her and didn't move, only breathed. The wind picked up again, slow and tired, and carried with it the smell of ash and something else, something like memory. The wolf, the foal, and the woman sat there, in the cradle of rock and ruin, as the sun crested the ridge. And for a moment, the world remembered itself. Not as hunter and hunted, but as beings who chose, despite pain, despite fear, not to run, but to remain together. Mira didn't sleep that night. Not really. She had set up a temporary camp about 40 yards from the place where Dusk and Lorien had collapsed together. Close enough to see, far enough not to intrude. Her hands still trembled when she struck the tent poles into the blackened dirt, her fingers unsure, her chest tight with something she didn't dare name yet. Above her, the stars returned. A sky scoured clean by fire. It should have been beautiful. It wasn't. It was humbling. She called in the coordinates to a wildlife rescue team, her voice low, words careful, choosing every one like it might change the truth. Not everything, no. Not yet. She said she'd found an orphaned foal in critical condition. She said she needed medical assistance by dawn. She said nothing about the wolf. Because how could she? What words existed for what she had seen? She sat on the cool earth outside her tent, the fire crackling in a small stove nearby, the smell of heat and ash still lingering in every breath she drew. She dipped a cloth into warm water she had rationed carefully, folding it with trembling hands. And as she moved, she thought of every photo she'd ever taken, of the hours she'd spent waiting for the perfect light, the perfect angle, the perfect moment. And how none of them, none, could have prepared her for the moment she chose not to raise the lens. She approached the edge of the slope. Dusk's ears flicked before she stepped into view. He didn't move, didn't growl, only watched. She knelt slowly, placed the damp cloth on a flat rock about 10 feet away from them. Then she backed up, step by step. Back at the tent, she sat and waited. She didn't know what for. Maybe to see if the universe would blink first. Minutes passed. Then more. And then Dusk rose. Staggering. Limping. He sniffed the cloth. Looked at her. Then carried it in his jaws back to Lorien. The foal had not moved much, though his ears twitched when the wolf approached. Dusk knelt beside him. Gently, he placed the cloth across the foal's muzzle. The gesture was impossible. Deliberate. Mira bit down hard on her lip to keep from crying. But it didn't help. She didn't lift the camera. She didn't even breathe. Some actions did not need to be documented. They needed to be remembered. The firelight dimmed. The air grew colder. Mira wrapped herself in a thermal blanket, but the chill wasn't in her bones, it was in her chest. In her mind. What she had witnessed had undone something. She kept thinking, what if no one believes me? What if no one should? She closed her eyes, tried to rest. But each time her breath slowed, she imagined dusk, still awake. Watching the dark. Watching the foal. And so she opened her eyes again. Sat up. Just to keep watch with him. Because some vows are silent. And some nights demand that we be more than we are. The coyotes never came back. She didn't know if they were afraid. Or if, somehow, they understood. When the first pale lines of dawn began to edge the canyon, Mira rose. Her limbs were stiff. Her shoulders ached. But she moved without hesitation. Outside, the ash had settled. A soft gray powder, like the world was trying to make peace with itself. And dusk was still there. He had not slept. He had not turned away. He sat beside Lorien, head low, breath steady. His eyes, when they met hers, were not the eyes of a beast. They were the eyes of someone who had made a promise. And Mira understood something then, with terrifying clarity. Dusk would not leave until someone worthy took his place. The rescue helicopter arrived later that morning. Its rumble shattered the stillness. Lorien stirred weakly. Dusk stood slowly, stiff and slow, but still steady. Mira waved her arms and signaled the team to approach, but softly. Easy, she called out. Move slow. They obeyed. Not just because of training, but because something in the canyon felt sacred. Dr. Celine Hargrove, a field vet with over 20 years of hard-earned wisdom, approached first. She crouched beside Lorien, examining him gently. And then she noticed Dusk. Her breath caught. That wolf, is he injured? Mira nodded. He's the reason the foal's still alive. Dr. Hargrove blinked. He stayed? He never left. There was a silence between them. A long one. It said everything words couldn't. The vet administered fluids. The team carefully placed Lorien into a soft sling. Dusk rose with effort, tail lowered, hackles still but alert. He didn't bare teeth. He didn't growl. But when Lorien whimpered, Dusk turned to Mira. Just looked. And Mira stepped between them. She held up both palms and said gently, he's safe now. We'll take care of him. Dusk's body didn't move. But his eyes did. They flicked to the foal. Then to her. And then he turned. Slow. Steady. Limping slightly. But with dignity that defied his wounds. He disappeared into the canyon brush. Mira watched until she couldn't see him anymore. Not because she didn't want to let him go, but because she knew. He had entrusted something to her, and she had no right to fail it. The helicopter lifted into the sky, rotors tearing the quiet into ribbons. It carried a wounded foal, a silent miracle, and the weight of a story too large to tell. Mira didn't take a photo. She didn't need to, because some truths stay with you. Even when no one else saw them, even when no one else believes, they remain, like footprints in ash, like a wolf who watched through the night, like the wild, remembering something we forgot. Lorien survived. Barely. He arrived at the sanctuary half-conscious, his legs stiff and trembling, eyes dull with exhaustion. The medical team worked through the night, rehydrating him, treating the wounds, testing vitals. Mira stayed nearby. She didn't interfere, just watched. And waited. She still carried the cloth. The one Dusk had soaked, then placed across Lorian's muzzle. She hadn't washed it. Something in her refused to let go of the scent. Because every time Lorian stirred, twitched, cried out, Mira pressed the cloth gently beside his face. And every time, the foal calmed. No medicine had the same effect. No machine could compete. It wasn't just scent. It was memory. It was the presence of a guardian, distilled in something small enough to hold but too sacred to explain. For days, Mira stayed. She slept near his stall, took notes, kept her phone off. She didn't upload, didn't tweet, didn't tell a soul. Some things weren't for the world to consume. Some things had to be protected, ferociously. Like a secret between two beating hearts. By the third week, Lorian stood on his own. Still weak. Still thin. But upright. The first time he took a step, Mira was there. He wobbled. She didn't reach out, she let him try. He fell. But he tried again. And when he stood steady, legs trembling but firm, Mira felt something rise in her chest, a pressure, fierce and quiet, like gratitude, like grief, like worship. It was on the 24th day that she knew she couldn't return to her old life. The desert hadn't just taken something. It had given her something too. A responsibility. A question. And now, an answer. That night, Mira sat down with the director of the facility. She laid out a plan, bold, idealistic, maybe impossible. A place, she said, not just to rescue, but to remember, to honor. A sanctuary not just for wild animals, but for wild bonds. For those who chose not to run. She called it Wild Rights Sanctuary. A place where the stories written in blood, dust, and silence could find refuge. Where nature's strange miracles could happen again. Where no one would have to explain why a wolf stood guard over a foal. Because here, it made sense. Here, it was sacred. It took 6 months to secure the land. Another 4 to build. She worked through the nights, drafting documents by flashlight, holding fundraisers, making calls, drawing from a well of energy she didn't know she had. When she needed strength, she remembered the night Dusk bled beneath the stars and didn't back down. When she needed vision, she remembered Lorian's eyes, open, glassy, waiting for the world to return. A year later, Wild Rights opened its gates. Not to the public, but to the wild. They came slowly. Mustangs relocated from auction lots. Wolves injured in wildfires. Old elk too proud to die behind a fence. And in the center of it all, Lorian. Now stronger. Now older. His coat had regained its luster. His eyes were sharper. But he still paused, every dusk, at the edge of the main field. He would lift his head, sniff the air, and Mira sometimes swore that he was still waiting, still listening, still remembering. There were rumors, of course, of an old wolf seen in the hills nearby, of eyes glowing just beyond the tree line, of prints found after storms, large, worn, familiar. Mira never confirmed, never denied. She only smiled, because she didn't need proof. She had something stronger. She had stayed. And so had he. In some way that didn't need a body. In some way that lived in the dust, in the heartbeat of the canyon, in the quiet bond between the ones who never gave up. And in the cloth she still kept, folded carefully, in a box under her bed. Worn. Faded. Still smelling, faintly, of ashen fur and something wild. Something true. 6 months had passed. Lorien was no longer the trembling foal collapsed in the dirt. He ran now. Not fast, not wild like the colts born free, but with purpose. With joy. With strength that had once seemed impossible. Each afternoon, Mira watched him gallop across the sanctuary's open field, hoofs kicking dust, muscles rippling beneath a glossy chestnut coat. He had grown, filled out. But some part of him, perhaps the most vital part, had stayed exactly the same. Because every dusk, he returned to the same ridge. The same hill. The one that overlooked the northern edge of Wildright's sanctuary. He would stand there, silent, ears forward, eyes locked on the tree lean. Waiting. Always waiting. Mira didn't question it. Not anymore. She stood beside him once, just out of sight, and saw it. The longing. Not for the past. Not for his herd. But for something else. A presence that wasn't physical. A promise. A pact. And then, one morning, before the sun had fully breached the canyon, Mira found tracks. Wolf tracks. Old. Deep. Unmistakable. They circled the outer trees and vanished again, like footprints made of fog. And later that week, he appeared. Dusk. Or what remained of him. Mira had gone to check the outer camera traps and caught a blur, a flicker, then frozen. It wasn't the same wolf who had once stood tall before coyotes. He was thinner now. His leg dragged slightly. One paw twisted oddly, bent from an old break never set. But his eyes, those amber eyes, still burned. She didn't approach. She didn't call. She only opened the gate. Dusk didn't enter. He didn't need to. That night, Mira left the gate open. And at dawn, she found Lorien standing at the top of the hill again. But this time, he wasn't alone. Dusk lay nearby. Not touching. Not close. But present. His sides rose and fell slowly. His ears twitched at the smallest sound. Lorien didn't look at him. He didn't need to. They both stared out over the ridge together, silent sentinels. Two souls who had once looked death in the eye, and chose not to turn away. They were not companions. Not in the human sense. They did not play. Did not brush against one another. Did not share warmth or food or calls. But they stayed. And that was enough. Mira set up a camera, just one, facing the ridge. She checked it once a week. Never shared the footage. Most of the time, it was empty. But sometimes, there they were. Two shapes in the mist. Still. Alive. Together. She journaled their presence, noting times, weather, movement, or lack thereof. And slowly, she realized something deeper. Dusk wasn't visiting. He was returning. This place wasn't a sanctuary Mira had built. It was a forest no one had believed could exist. A place not bound by rules of prey and predator. A place outside instinct, where two creatures could be what nature rarely allowed. Witnesses to each other's survival, to each other's becoming. One night, Mira stood at the ridge alone. The wind was warm, the air soft, the stars above clearer than they had been in months. She closed her eyes. She remembered everything. The howl, the blood, the trembling foal, the cloth, the silent retreat of the coyotes. She opened her eyes and looked out across the field. Lorien stood beneath a juniper tree, head lifted toward the hills. And on the far rise, barely a silhouette against the breaking light, was dusk. Old, worn, watching. And Mira whispered, as much to herself as to the wind, "They're not friends. They're not bonded by anything we understand. They are two souls who stepped through death and found each other on the other side." The cloth was still beneath Myra's pillow. Faded, frayed, but never washed. Because some things you don't clean away. Some stories you don't explain. You just return to them, like a forest no one believed was real, and find it breathing. Still there. Still wild. Still waiting. 6 months after Dusk's return, everything had changed. But what they had done for each other never aged. No one saw Lorien as a fragile foal anymore. He had grown. Stronger. But each afternoon, he still paused on that same rise, where a scarred wolf had once waited, not because of instinct, but something older. Once, Mira quietly took a photo from afar, Dusk lying still. Lorien standing just a few paces away. No contact. No call. Yet their gazes held each other. She hadn't planned to share it. But when she finally did, it spread across the world. A grainy clip. Just 20 seconds. A bleeding wolf. A foal with cracked lips. And a moment no one could explain, the wolf didn't strike. He bowed and pressed water to the mouth of what should have been prey. They called it the bell in the desert. It made no sound, and yet everyone who saw it felt something ring inside. Mira had hesitated for weeks. Some miracles aren't meant to spread. They're meant to be protected. But in the end, she chose to share. Not for fame, but because the world needed to remember not a miracle, but ourselves. From that moment, the story no longer belonged to her. It walked on its own legs, fueled by something ancient and kind. They used it in ethics classes, in therapy circles for children who didn't know how to name grief, in talks about empathy and choice. The image was printed large. A soaked tongue, a cracked mouth. No human hands, but something deeper than instinct had spoken. Once, Mira stood before a classroom. No slideshow. Just one photo. She held it up and said, "This isn't a photo of a wolf saving a horse. It's a photo of us. Of something humanity once knew and forgot." At Wild Rites, they built a quiet room. No exhibit. No tour. Just a softly lit wall. At its center, that image. Beneath it, a plaque. The strongest soul is not the one who survives, but the one who chooses mercy when it holds the power to destroy. People came from everywhere, not to see animals, but to sit in silence, to remember. Mira often passed by. Sometimes her fingers brushed the photo's edge, and she would think the desert never gave her answers, only a question. What might change if we chose to stay? And for the rest of her life, she lived as someone who had stayed. Not because she was brave, but because she had seen what it looked like when instinct fell silent and the soul finally spoke. We often think it's our duty to teach animals how to be more civilized. But maybe we're the ones who need to be reminded that gentleness is not weakness, that forgiveness is not surrender, and that animals don't need saving from us. Maybe we're the ones who need to learn again how to love without conditions. There are souls, like dusk, who return, not out of survival instinct, but because of something unnamed, a loyalty that became a soul. If this story stirred something quiet in you, like a soft bell ringing in your chest, leave a comment. Share it with someone who might be standing at their own crossroads between silence and surrender. And don't forget to follow Gallop of Glory, where stories aren't just told, they're felt. Because maybe, the next time you find yourself lost in the wind, a soul, tattered and old, will choose to return. Not to save you, just so you won't be alone.